The family business, a confectionery and bakery business, is a very old one. It was founded in 1833 by a little old lady, Mrs. Thompson, who set up a bread shop near Clark's Bridge in Cork. It's been in the family ever since, and naturally it was supposed that myself and my brother would eventually go into the business, and I think a certain amount of disappointment was felt when we decided to break out and go our separate ways. I did, however, study for the business for about 3.5 years in England and in Germany and in Belgium, and eventually became a master baker. I think possibly the most interesting experience of those 3.5 years was working in a very small, extremely good quality confectionery shop in Bavaria. This was quite a formative experience, I think, really. The skill and the speed of these German confectioners was really most impressive. Ironically enough, I think that the skills involved in making confectionery are actually greater than those needed for stone carving. There are far more materials for a start. And working with these people has actually helped me, I would say, in becoming a stone carver. Helped me, for example, to organize myself more efficiently and to plan out my day. And I think possibly given me a greater dexterity with tools. As a follow-on from my experience with the Christian Brothers, when I was working in Belgium, I was given the job of making innumerable marzipan pigs, for which I think I had an aptitude. An indication to me maybe that my skills lay elsewhere. It was shortly after my pig-making experience that I gave up confectionery and became a stone carver. As a stone carver, I find myself part of a remnant of a glorious Irish tradition. There are very few stone carvers left. Kellymount Quarries is one of the few quarries still being worked. It's in Paulstown, County Kilkenny. I love to come up here to collect my stone because it reminds me of the wonderful marble quarries in Carrara in Italy, which I used to enjoy so much. It's very similar, the noise and the dust, except of course the heat. The heat is missing. The limestone quarried at Kellymount Quarries is a very fine, very obedient, reliable limestone. For lettering purposes, is very suitable because it takes a good clean letter and you get a very fine definition between the surface of the limestone, the slaty blue surface of the limestone, and the actual cut. Ireland indeed has an enormous variety of stones to offer, and it's really very sad that they're no longer being quarried. It's such a shame that so many stones are being brought in from abroad, South African granite, for example, and white Carrara marble, and we have so much to offer here. Even close to where I live, near Middleton, there was a very fine marble quarry, a red marble quarry, which unfortunately is now abandoned. I very much admire the honesty and the directness of a lot of medieval stone sculpture. I love the tenderness, the humor, the strength of it, and the sheer stony quality of the carving. One of the finest examples of this, of course, is Jerpoint Abbey in County Kilkenny. One very good way of keeping a record of one's work is to take rubbings from the inscriptions and also from the little relief carvings that one makes. It's a very, very fine record, of course, because it's possibly more accurate than the photograph because it is actually to size. And they make very lovely things in themselves often. Any carving that I undertake has to be naturally worked out, first of all, on paper in the form of a drawing, or if it's a three-dimensional sculpture, would need to be worked out, at any rate, even roughly, in clay or plasticine before I actually tackle the block. One's ideas come from so many different quarters, possibly a visit to a quarry, a conversation with a good friend, the reading of a book that's left a profound impression on one, or possibly even the finding of a stone on the strand. All these can generate ideas. I might make a model a quarter the size of the eventual block of stone will produce, and use the model really just to start one off, to enable one to remove large areas of stone, to fix various positions of the figure in the block. From then on, abandon the model and talk directly to the stone. One doesn't really want to reproduce in stone what one has made in clay. I don't believe overmuch in the distinction between stone carving and stone sculpting, between the arts and the crafts, between the fine arts and the crafts. I believe really that anything that is well made is, to a greater or lesser extent, a work of art. And I think it's really not so much a difference in kind, but more of degree. A well-made table, a well-made pair of shoes, a well-made gravestone, or a well-made statue for a church are essentially of the same kind. But obviously a Madonna and Child that is beautifully conceived and executed would be a more exalted object, possibly, than a beautifully made shoe. But I do think it's a question of degree rather than of kind, and I think that there has been an overemphasis on the differences between the arts and the crafts. Of course, if you're a stone carver, the difference does break down almost immediately, because when you make things in stone, you're called upon to make both useful things and decorative things. I call myself a stone carver because it sounds more relaxed. The first tool you use on a large block of stone is a pitcher, a wide, flat chisel, with which, if you have a right angle, you can pitch off large pieces of stone. I often now use an angle grinder to make deep incisions into the block in order to create right angles, which I can then pitch off and, as it were, work my way into the block to a high point in the carving with the point. When I first started carving, I was very anti all machinery. I felt that stone carvers should deal directly with the stone, and that one's rhythm should be gradually reduced to the rhythms of the stone, and that one should set up a dialogue with the stone. I still feel this very strongly, but I now realize that it's foolish not to use a certain amount of machinery to do donkey work. I still, of course, have my tools tempered by the blacksmith in Middleton, but I more and more find that, except for points which need tempering every so often, that I now use tungsten chisels, which are very useful because they keep their edge for so long and don't need tempering. I rather disapproved of them when I first started carving, but since my stay in Italy and since my discovery of the very, very fine, sensitively designed tools that they make in Italy, that I no longer have this inhibition about using tungsten. I have quite a number of exciting commissions in hand at the moment. Just at the present, I'm working on a large tabernacle stand for Trinity Church, Cork, which is being renovated. It's a large block of limestone with the ancient Greek symbol for the fish, for Christ, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Saviour, ichthos, carved in relief letters on it. I love doing church work. I love my work to be used in churches. I love making carvings of crucifixes, Stations of the Cross, saints. There's such wonderful possibilities for expression in the Christian story. When I was a boy, I suppose I was really very religious. But in my early 20s, I grew very dissatisfied with organized religion and no longer practiced, in fact. However, in the last 8 years or so, I've, as it were, come back. And I'm now an orthodox, committed Christian. And indeed, I like to give expression to this in my work. I think I'll make this brew slightly less strong than the last time.
It's a very good idea.
Peter, would you get me a wooden spoon, lovey? I love the combination of work and domesticity, but I'm ashamed to say, despite my early training as a confectioner, I do very little cooking in the house. I'm the brewer of the family and make quite drinkable beer. Okay. I see some tears down there. Here. Beer for Papa. And Mama. When I first became a stone carver, my interest in figure carving ran absolutely parallel with my love of cutting letter forms in stone. In fact, the very first thing I ever cut in stone was a letter. Seems to be the right place for a letter. All our knowledge of past civilizations come down to us from stones with lettering of one form or another on them. Seamus Murphy, the famous Cork sculptor, was of great help to me when I first started stone carving. And when he died in 1975, he very kindly left me all his workbenches and chisels and much of his unfinished work to complete. I think perhaps, however, an even greater influence on me was the English stone carver Eric Gill, whose work I discovered through my close friendship with his daughter and son-in-law, Joan and Rene Haig, who lived in Shanagarry. Two of my most prized possessions are the lettering hammers of both Eric Gill and Seamus Murphy. I feel I'm doing a useful job of work when I see an inscription in a public place. I sometimes take liberties with stones. I like, for example, sometimes to place an I inside an O, to join letters in an inventive way. I think you have to be very careful in this field. You can't overdo it. You can't be eccentric. You can't be too individualistic. But I think you can end up with something extremely beautiful. The polishing is done with carborundum stone, and then, of course, emery cloth, wet and dry paper, is very useful for rubbing the stone to finer and finer degrees of finish. I'm making this little crucifix in a piece of Kerry sandstone, which has a beautiful grainy texture and a lovely warm colour, but is terrible on chisels. It's going to be set into the wall above the fireplace in our cottage in Connemara, which we've just bought and are at the moment restoring. We were on a walking holiday about 2 years ago near Roundstone, and we discovered this wonderful cottage which we bought from Peter Ward, a local farmer. It's very isolated. You have to walk a mile to get to it or come by boat. Of course, this is precisely what attracted us to the place. I plan to do a lot of work up here, drawings and small carvings. It's a most inspiring place.
You have to get the roof on, you'll be flying with the wind.
Richard Rat in Baron Brown's castle. Once upon a time, towards evening, Peter, Barbanus and Sir Donald arrived at Baron Brown's castle. They crossed over the moat and they knocked loudly on the big oak door. The little man came to the door and said, "What can I do for you, kind gentlemen?" "Could we," they said, "stay for the night with you? We'd love to stay in your castle." right at the very top of the castle. And in order to reach the room, they had to climb a very sinister staircase, Matthew. And do you know why it was sinister?
Why?
Because strange sounds were heard at night.
A rat.
Nobody knew what it was.
There's a rat.
Was it a rat?
Richard rat.
Bedtime, boys. Come on.